Today I want to talk to you on the subject of developing leaders around you. Yesterday, when we spoke concerning developing the leader within you, we worked on your own personal development. Well, today we want to work on the development of people that are around you. And it's kind of an introduction for this lesson today. I would like to share with you just some observations that I have made about leadership and about organizations. For example, let's take the subject of leadership for a moment. I have found that leadership determines the direction of the organization. That's a fact. It's very simple. Leaders cast the vision, and leaders will have high influence on the direction of which the organization is going to take. Now, what I've also found is that structure determines the size of the organization. How you structure your congregation, how you structure your business, how you structure whatever organization you're leading has a lot to do with the size of it. Let me explain. I was talking one day with my friend Willie George. And he said, John, when I was in high school, I was a middle linebacker and I was a captain of the team. And he said I was the best player on the team, but the college coaches, when they came to our high school to recruit, they didn't talk to me. They talked to another linebacker that wasn't as good as I was. And it bothered me, and he said, I talked to the college recruiter and said, why are you guys talking to him instead of me? He said, I think I'm the best player on the team. And the college recruiter said, you are. He said, what you don't understand, though, is he says, we've looked at your bone structure, your physical body, and you're as big as you're going to get. But the kid over there, he's got a big frame. He's going to gain another 25 or 30 pounds over these next couple of years, and he's going to be the size of what a college linebacker needs to be. You see, all that recruiter was saying was that the structure of the body could determine the size. Well, it's not only true physically in a body, it's also true in an organization. Many times as pastors, we have what we call one-cell churches or congregations. Well, the one-cell church cannot grow to be a large church. So leadership determines the direction of the church, and structure determines the size of the church. Relationships determine the morale of the organization. How people relate with one another, the body life within it, will determine to a great extent what the morale of that organization is going to become. And the reason that I'm beginning with this little bit of teaching on illustration of organizations and what affects them is because we're going to be dealing with what I'm about to say right now, which is kind of key for the whole day. Just as leadership determines the direction of an organization, structure determines the size, relationships determine the morale, hang on now, personnel determines the potential of the organization. Your organization is going to be the size of your key people within your church, within your company. And so therefore, our ability to find, develop, and raise up leaders is going to be absolutely key. In July of 1995 was my last Sunday at Skyline. The February preceding that time is when I announced that I would be leaving the church in July, and I announced my official resignation. Now, Bill Klassen, my prayer partner, is here. The Sunday that I announced to the church that I would be leaving in July and doing my national leadership training and the things that I'm doing at this time, at the end of the time, the church board came up and they were very kind and just showed good visible support. And Bill came up, my prayer partner, and he laid his hand upon my head and he prayed over me. And basically his prayer was something like this: Dear God, John has worked himself out of a job. And that's exactly what I had done. I had worked myself out of a job. I had raised up people. I'd raised up leaders with the help of my staff. We had developed all kind of leaders, dozens and dozens and hundreds of leaders within the church that could carry on the ministry. And my job basically was done. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about how to develop other people. Now, in this first lesson, I want to talk to you about leading from the highest level, because there are 4 different levels of leadership, and we've got to understand them before we can start developing other people. For example, there's the entry level. At the entry level, leaders know where they're going. That's a prerequisite for every leader, to know where you're going. That doesn't make you a leader, by the way. There are a lot of people who know where they're going, but they're not a leader. But every leader that is a leader knows where he or she is going. The credibility level is when the leaders are able to take themselves there. They not only know where they're going, but they can look with integrity at their people and say, I've not only know where I'm going, but I've been there. Been there, done that. Tremendous credibility and integrity when somebody has not only charted their course, but arrived at the destination. Now, that doesn't make you a leader either. To be able to have arrived at a destination doesn't mean that you know how to lead anyone. It just means that you know how to lead yourself there. The third level is what I call the accepted level, and this is where 99% of people look at leaders and say, this is what a leader is and this is what a leader does. On the accepted level of leadership, leaders are able to take followers there. In other words, I not only have been there myself, but I'm able to take you with me, which is truly the definition of a leader. Leadership is what? Influence, absolutely. So when I have the ability to influence you from point A to point B, I can then with real integrity say I'm a leader. But there's a higher level, and this is what this whole lesson is going to be about today, that I don't hear anybody talking about. I don't read books on it. But it's absolutely essential to developing other people. And the highest level of leadership is when leaders are able to take leaders with them. Because once you take leaders, you not only take those that you influence, but you take all the people that the leaders influence also. You see, the function of a leader is to produce more leaders, not followers. Now, if I can get anything through today in this lesson, it's what I've just said. The function of a leader is to produce more leaders, not more followers. Let me show you how this works. By definition, if you have followers, you are a leader. But it's highly possible to have an organization or a congregation full of followers and not have leaders, of which, without other leaders to assist you and help you and add value to you, your organization is only going to get to a certain size. And then it's going to stop growing because there are only so many people you can handle as a leader with only followers following. The good news is if you have the ability to raise up leaders, you will always have followers. Because what do other leaders have? Other leaders have followers. So watch this. If you raise up 10 leaders, you not only influence the people that you influence that are followers, but they influence the people they influence that are followers. And now all of a sudden you begin to multiply just by raising up leaders. You realize every time you develop a leader, you multiply? Every time you raise up a leader, you multiply? You just don't get the leader. That's addition. You get all the followers that leader has the ability to influence over the next few years. And so we're going to work on the highest level of leadership, and we're going to talk in a few moments about 10 differences between leaders who develop leaders and leaders who develop followers. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But let me just do a couple of preliminary things. Let me give you some observation about leadership since I've been teaching since 1980. Number one is that there's a leadership vacuum in America. I cannot believe the hunger in America in every sector for leadership. Whether it's in the political arena or the educational arena or the business arena or the church arena, I can tell you this. I know no area in America that has an abundance of leaders. I read a very interesting article out of a magazine, the New Republic magazine, a couple of years ago, which basically was asking, where are the leaders? And it talked about when our country was formed and the Revolutionary War and the forming of our country and the Constitution. and how that there were at that time, I think, 3 million people, but there was an abundance of leaders. I mean, there were just leaders everywhere. Leaders that were forming our country, and now 240 million or whatever we have in America. And it just seems like there are not a lot of leaders. There are a lot of high-profile people. There are a lot of celebrities. But there are not a lot of leaders. There's a leadership vacuum in America. Secondly, there's a leadership vacuum in the church. Major. It's like the guy who worked with Walmart that saw me during one of the breaks yesterday and basically said I left the business world to go in the church world because he said I just saw that there seemed to be a tremendous vacuum of leaders. Well, think about it. Why shouldn't there be a vacuum of leadership in the church? Let me ask you a question. This is a simple question. Remember, my name's John. I'm a communicator. I'm not an educator. Educators take something simple and make it complicated. It's the nature of the beast. They can't help themselves. Communicators take something complicated and make it simple. Now, let me just ask you a question. People all the time say, well, where are the leaders in the church? It doesn't amaze me that we don't have enough Christian church leaders. Let me ask you a simple question. Who's taking the responsibility to raise them? I don't mean this unkindly, but I'm here to tell you, I haven't found any denominations that are taking responsibilities to raise leaders. I haven't found any denominations that are into major leadership development training. And I haven't found any, or very few, maybe any is a little strong, very, very, very few educational institutions that really have made leadership their primary concern. Now, they advertise that they're developing leaders, but they ought to be sued for misrepresentation. They're not developing leaders. The reason I know that is go look at their curriculum. They're developing theologians. They're developing teachers. They're not developing leaders. Professors. Now, before we get real hard on the denominations or the educational institutions, I'll come right home to where we live, gang. Come on. The local churches aren't producing leaders either. My father, who was a college president for 17 years, said it always amazes me how a parent or a pastor will give me an 18-year-old kid and expect me to do in 4 years what they didn't do the first 18. Hello. I mean, when you look around and see the vacuum of leadership in the church, you shouldn't be amazed. I don't see anybody taking responsibility for it. One of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing is because I feel an incredible passion that somebody ought to be teaching leadership and giving the practical handles of how to lead. Because I know one thing, when I went to Hillham, Indiana, fresh out of college, I would have loved to have gone to a seminar like this, and I'd have loved to somebody sit down and tell me how to have a board meeting and how to handle Claude. Although I did a pretty good job with that one, didn't I? Huh? That was my success. You ought to hear all my failures. The third observation I would make about leadership is that a new leadership paradigm is not only needed, but is evolving in America today. The old leadership paradigm was basically the head buffalo has the whole herd stand around him waiting for him to make a decision, and when he moves, they move. That's outdated, folks. The new paradigm is the flying geese who go across the country and rotate leadership and share the load and develop a kind of a team kind of carrying on work that allows them to go further distances faster than they ever could have done by one person doing everything. The old leadership thought is, I'm the leader, follow me. And the new leadership thought is, here's the goal, let's go together. The old leadership thought is the leader knows best. The new leadership thought is two heads are better than one. It's kind of it's a team type of a ministry. And because of that, there is a shifting, not only the paradigm, but the foundational principles for this new style of leadership, which basically say that leaders transfer ownership for the work to those who are executing the work, and that they create an environment for the people to own it, and then the leaders coach the development of these capabilities in the people, and then leaders learn fast themselves and encourage others to learn quickly. In other words, they're learning quickly, and then as quickly as they learn it, they pass it on to others. One more observation. That is that someone must take responsibility to raise up new leaders. Someone really needs to do that. I'm taking responsibility to do the best that I can, but I need your help. I want you to go back to your local churches. I want you to go back to your business and your organizations. I want you to raise up leaders too. I look forward to the day when I do conferences and I literally have 2 and 3 generations under me of leaders where people, men and women, come up to me and say, my pastor came to your conference and has trained us with some of your resources and with some of his resources, and now I'm a leader, and to get this thing multi-generational. Someone needs to take responsibility to raise up the new leaders. In the area of responsibility, I suppose there are 3 questions we should always ask. If we do not do it, who will? That speaks to me of personal responsibility. If we don't do it, who is going to do this? And if we do not do it now, when? When are we going to do it? Which speaks of a high priority. And if we do it only for ourselves, why? Which speaks of our motives. Our motives must be pure. Our priority of developing them must have an urgency about it, and we must take personal responsibility. Okay. What is the difference between a leader who develops a leader and a leader who develops followers? 10 differences. Number 1 is desire. The leader's desire is different if they want to develop followers versus if they want to develop leaders. Let me explain. Leaders who develop followers need to be needed. And leaders who develop leaders want to be succeeded. And that's a major, major difference. Let me put it another way. Leaders who develop followers want to be recognized, and leaders who develop leaders want to be replaced. That's kind of cuts through the chase, doesn't it? What's your goal as a leader? I mean, is it your desire to be indispensable? Is it your desire to have your people say, you know what, Pastor, let me tell you something. We couldn't make it in this church without you. Do you want to hear them say when you come home from vacation after 3 weeks, wow, I'm glad you're back. Man, everything stopped while you were there gone. Do you consider it a compliment when you leave and the attendance goes down? When you come, it goes back up? You know, I've always had mixed feelings about that. Because if you leave and the attendance goes up, and you come back and it goes down, boy, it's kind of a mixed bag, isn't it? Now, here's what I'm saying, very simple. You'll never develop leaders. You'll never raise leaders as long as you want to get all the credit. As long as you want to hear the people say, without you, we can't do this. As long as your ego has to be continually stroked in such a way that everybody realizes you are truly the indispensable man or woman within the organization. Dan Ryland is here today. Dan was my executive pastor for 6 years, was with me for 14 years. Got in last night, came into the hotel room, came up to see me. We had a good time. Now, Dan does this better than anybody I know anywhere. There isn't anybody that can touch his gifts in developing leaders. He has raised up, I have no idea. How many men did you raise up just through your Joshua's men in the church? 100. 100 men. Raise them up. I'm talking about 1 year training, usually taking them about 7 or 8 at a time. I mean, anywhere where Dan had been in the church, there were leaders. In fact, basically, Dan would do a ministry and raise up leaders, and then he'd give the job to someone else. At one time, he had the Sunday school. He had the Sunday school when it was in bad shape. In fact, I always gave things that were in bad shape to Dan. because he could put him in good shape. When I gave him the Sunday school, it was flat, it was plateaued, it was running 1,000. And when he got done with it a few years later, it was 2,800. And when he handed it back to me, he said, well, John, he said, it needed me at 1,000, but at 2,800 it doesn't need me. They're running their own now. I've raised up 40, 50 leaders in the Sunday school, and they're handling all their own. It's kind of doing its own thing. I'm a little bored with it. What's next? So I said, well, lay ministry. We had about 112 people that were having a ministry in the church when he took it, and when he got done to it and handed it back to me, 1,800 people were doing ministry in the church. I mean, everything I gave him, he just went in, and he very simply, what he did is he raised up leaders. Started a Sunday school class from scratch. I mean, I'm talking about just young couples, professional business couples. Took it from scratch and built it up to about 225. Raised up another couple, lay couple in the church to lead half of it and said, okay, you take half the class and I'll take the other half of the class to a new campus. And so they took half the class, he took the other half of the class, and together they got that class up to about 300. But he raised leaders. And the secret of Dan's raising leaders was very simple. Dan has no desire to be needed. He has a desire to get the job done. He has a desire to raise up leaders. He has the desire to go find them, develop them. He loves to develop people, but his whole purpose of developing people is to develop them and then hand the ball to them and say, have at it, baby, it's yours. You see, leaders who develop followers, they need to be needed. They need to have constant affirmation of how important they are. Leaders that develop leaders, I can tell you, their joy is in the development of the people, watching them rise up, watching them do the job, and standing back and say, look at them now, look at them, look at them. 3 years ago, they couldn't even find the restrooms on this campus. Now look at them, look at them, look at them. That's the kick. Let me tell you another difference. Not only the leader's desire is different between those who raise up followers and those who raise up leaders. The second thing is the leader's focus is different. You see, leaders who develop followers, they focus on the weaknesses of people, and leaders who develop leaders focus on the strengths of people. And there's a major difference between those two. Now, just ask yourself for a moment. Just ask yourself, which do I focus on? Do I hone in on weaknesses of people? Or do I very quickly find their strengths and build on them? I can tell you right now, if you focus on the weaknesses of people, you'll paralyze them. The good news is, if it's your desire, they'll be yours for life. You focus on the weaknesses of people, and you know what the good news is? You get to be a lifetime counselor of them. They'll call you every week the rest of your life. That's the good news. You can be Mr. Fix-It, Mr. Answer Man. When you work with the weaknesses of people, the good news is they'll come to you all the time with their problems. Now, where do you focus? I mean, I don't mean this wrong, but many pastors, they get their kicks out of focusing on the weaknesses. For some of them, it helps them, it makes them feel strong. You know, isn't there a Messiah feeling about people who come to you and think that you've got the answer? Next time you're doing some counseling, blow the person's mind when they come to see you, and they kind of wait on you to give them some wisdom or do something, wave a wand or whatever. Blow their mind, and when they say something that they don't understand, look at them and say, you know, I don't have a clue. Beats me. Just kill them. Our ego won't let us do that. We like people coming to us and waiting on us and expecting us to do something for them. Now, let me give you 3 results of what happens when you focus on people's weaknesses. Number one, or letter A, is what I call a codependent relationship. When you focus on other people's weaknesses, you'll develop a codependent relationship. Pretty soon you'll be talking in terms like I hear all the time. Well, you know, that's my church. Those are my people. Those are my people. Can I tell you something? They're not yours. They're God's. Get a life. Absolutely amazes me the possessiveness of leaders. Remember, you love them with all your heart, but you hold on to them lightly. So what happens is we get in a codependent relationship, and this is so encouraged in the church. The church is so unhealthy in this area. There's major codependency in the congregations. Second thing is that both leader and follower become captive. It's a trap, and you need to understand the trap. What happens is that if you allow that to happen and you work on weaknesses, you both hold each other captive. Until, as a leader, you can't stretch or grow yourself, because every time you want to move forward and advance in your own life, you've got these people that are holding on to you and saying, wait a minute, you can't go, you can't leave me. And by the way, most of them don't want to take the trip. They don't want to take the trip. They want to sing Kumbaya one more time. I always get amused. This is just me, and please just overlook all of the idiosyncrasies in my life, and I've got a lot, so you have a lot to overlook. But I always get amazed at pastors that have beepers. I don't have any clue why you got a beeper. In fact, I had a pastor that day said, well, you don't have a beeper. I said, I'm not that important yet. I don't have that many people wanting to see me. Talk to me. Isn't that amazing? And I watch these pastors, they'll be in conference, little beeper going, hump they go, and they make that phone call and see who's out there and what do they need. And custodian ran out of toilet paper in the restrooms of the church. You don't want to live like that your whole life, do you? Do you really? Is that where you get your kick? You see, when you work on the weaknesses of people, and that's where you live in their weaknesses, you get codependent, you become captive, you trap each other. And thirdly, eventually, and I'll tell you what, you can go to the bank on this, the leader and the follower will hurt each other. What this all leads to in the end is hurt. You see, the leader may want to go on, but the follower want to hold on, and the follower may want to let go, but the leader has so much ego that he won't let her do it. And you say, by the way, in case you're saying, boy, John, you know a lot about this. How do you know so much about this? I can tell you why, because in the beginning I was a codependent pastor. Man, I want to tell you, if they'd have had beepers at Hillham, I'd have had one on each side, with two different numbers, just in case two people needed me at the same time. I would have. I'm telling you. In Hillham, man, I'm telling you. I was Mr. Country Doctor. I was Mr. Answer Man. I was Mr. Irreplaceable. Every Sunday they'd say, this guy's awesome. This guy's incredible. He made 35 calls this week, went to the hospital 3 times. This guy he's everywhere. In fact, in the little community there where I lived, I'd be in a home visiting somebody, and the phone rang at the home. And the person in the house would pick it up, and they'd say, we need to talk to Pastor. They knew where I was. They'd see my little Volkswagen parked in all these driveways, and, well, Pastor's over there. It was just incredible. We're going to have our 25th anniversary there, and I'm going to go back in December, because 25 years ago we built the building. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and apologize to those people. They think I'm going to come back and challenge them. I'm going to go back and lay down and ask forgiveness. Now, all I'm saying is when you deal with the weaknesses, this is exactly what's going on. You're going to get a codependent relationship. Now, what happens is when you deal with people's strengths, it's exactly opposite. Instead of a codependent relationship, you have what I call an empowering relationship. Listen to me, folks. I'm going to spend an hour today on empowerment in another lesson. I have never seen any person, any time, empower any other person by dealing with weaknesses. I've never seen it, and I challenge you to tell me a time when it can be done. Empowerment comes on the strength side, not the weakness side. Because the essentials of empowerment is the leader's willingness to transfer power. That's an essential of empowerment. And pastors who are codependent are not willing to do that, or leaders that are codependent are not willing to do that. Letter B. Both leader and follower, when you deal with strengths, release each other. They become released. Just as when you work with weaknesses, you become captive with the person. When you deal with strengths, you are released by that person. You're released to grow. You're released and by the way, you're released to deal with their weaknesses. See, I'm not trying to say that when you deal with strengths that you ignore anybody's weakness. But I'm going to tell you what, when you deal with their strengths and you play to their gifts, then you can go also and deal with their weaknesses. But if you deal with their weaknesses, they'll never, because of the insecurity of people, if you deal with their weaknesses, they'll never be able to get by them to go to their strengths. And letter C, eventually the leader and the follower will help each other. Instead of hurt each other, they'll help each other if you go with their strengths. How? Well, the follower becomes a leader, and the leadership load is now becoming shared, and both leaders multiply instead of add, and all of a sudden everybody helps each other, and the mentoring leader receives more in return than he or she ever gave. And that's exactly where I am in my life. I'm receiving more from people that I've poured my life into than I ever gave to them. And I could go through a whole list, and later on today when I talk about empowerment, I'll go through the list and equipping. I'll share with you how my dream team has helped me get dreams that I would never gotten by myself. But there's an empowerment there when you play the strengths. Okay, it's just a very simple question. Where's your focus? I'm ready to go to number 3, but before we go, where's your focus? Do you focus on the weaknesses of people or the strengths? Are you one of those pastors that gets in the pulpit and looks out the congregation on Sunday and say, "Dearly beloved, who has a problem today? Who feels one coming on? Who knows someone that has a problem today? Who knows how to spell problem? You can either lay down and die together, or you can rise up and climb together. If you really like working with the weaknesses of people, then I would suggest that you get a degree in counseling and become a counselor and help people. If not, if you're going to be a leader, leaders deal with strengths, not weaknesses. You see, you're going to have a choice in your life. You can either become a counselor of people or an equipper of people. And very seldom can you be both. Very, very seldom are you both. The third difference between leaders who develop followers and leaders who develop leaders is in the area of priorities. You see, leaders who develop followers devote their attention to the bottom 20% of the group, and leaders who develop leaders devote their attention to the top 20% of the group. It's just that simple. And I have in your notes a diagram of what I call the Pareto principle. It's an incredible principle. And I do not have time to teach it today. It's an hour-and-a-half lecture. If you want to know more about it, I have a video kit with 2 hours of video on it called Priorities, the Pathway to Success. It's a life-changing principle. If you do not understand it, I would strongly encourage you to get it. Basically, Pareto says that 20% of the people in your organization will do 80% of your work. 20% of the people in your organization will give you 80% of your money. 20% of the people in your organization will make 80% of your decisions. The 20-80 principle is an incredible principle which basically says you need to understand who your people are and prioritize them according to influence and effectiveness. I mean, the 20-80 principle works in every area of your church. It even works when you have dinner on the ground. I guarantee you, have dinner on the ground, 20% of the people in the church will eat 80% of the food. So what you need to do, if you've got 100 people in your organization, if you have 100 people in your church, it's very simple. 20 of those people will do 80% of everything you need in that church. So as a leader, the difference between leaders who develop followers and leaders that develop leaders is very simple. Leaders who develop followers spend 80% of their time with the bottom 20%. And leaders who develop leaders spend 80% of their time with the top 20%. It's not an issue, do you spend time? It's an issue of who do you spend time with. Just think with me for a moment. Just think of your organization. Just think of your congregation. Where do you spend your time? With the top 20% or the bottom 20%? Now, 95% of all pastors in America, without even question, we don't even talk about it, 95% of all pastors in America spend 80% of their time with the bottom 20%. Now remember, all day we're talking about developing leaders. This is a leadership conference. We're talking about developing the leaders around you. Now, why do we fail to give the top 20% our 80% of our time? And this is a good question. I mean, think about it for a moment. Since most of us are giving the bottom 20% 80% of our time, why do we fail to give the top 20% that 80% of our time? Several reasons. Are you ready? No leadership training is one. We are unprepared to train leaders, which can lead to intimidation. One of the reasons that we don't spend most of our time with the top people in the church or the organization is we've not been trained to, and so what happens is we're unprepared. I mean, we're just intimidated. We have no idea. We don't have any idea what even to do with those people. We look at those people and say, good night, they've got more money than I do. I mean, what would I say to them? What would I do? Another reason is because of wrong leadership training. We aren't trained to work with the top 20%. We're trained to work with the bottom 20%. Think of all of the education, all your classes in college. I promise you did. How many courses did you have on equipping people? How many courses did you have on going to the people that were in the top 20%? No, we're constantly driven to the ministry side, not the leadership side. Another reason is weak leadership skills. The bottom 20% follow easier. In fact, let me put it another way. The bottom 20% always follow. They don't have anything else to do in life. Hut, 2, 3, 4. Hut, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there's a line. I must get in the line. Hut, 2, 3, 4. Hut, 2, 3, 4. Whoop, stop. Whoop, line stopped. Oh, stop here. Just a thought. I want to tell you something. The top 20%, they don't hut 2, 3, 4 anything in life. You hut 2, 3, 4 on them, they say, excuse me? What's that stupid line doing over there? See, I learned a long time ago. The bottom 20%, they just follow easy. Top 20%, they don't follow unless there's a good reason. They ask questions such as, excuse me, where are you going? And some leaders are intimidated by that. They think that takes audacity for somebody to ask, where are you going? They just want to say, well, wait a minute, I'm the leader, just follow me. Don't you respect leadership? Of course they respect leadership. They just also would like to know where they're taking their trip. The bottom 20% follow easier. Maybe there's another reason, and that's wrong priorities. I think the bottom 20% call on us. Isn't that true? Boy, the bottom 20%, they'll just Call on you. Pastor, I need you. Got a wart on my toe. What should I do with it? And isn't it true when they come to see you? Isn't it true when they come to see you? They always want more time than you can give them. You mean I can only have a half hour? Well, can I see you again tomorrow? You know, a leader comes into your office, half the time they won't even sit down. Pastor, I don't want to bother you. I know you're busy. Look, can I bounce this off? I just want to ask you this question here. And boy, they just take off and they bounce off. Now, I'll see you later. They're gone. You know why? They're gone. They've got an agenda. They got things to do. Insecurity is another reason. The bottom 20% make us feel special. Don't they? And by the way, you say, John, how do you know all this? Because I've spent a lot of time with the bottom 20%. I've been there, done that. And I'll tell you, the bottom 20%, they'll say things to me that if I'm not careful, I'll believe. Yeah, they'll say that. I mean, they really will. They'll look at me and they'll say, oh, Pastor, I wouldn't make it without you. Just drop dead. They'll make it. You know, if you're not careful, you'll believe what those people tell you. Now, let me say one thing before I go on to the fourth difference. What I want to say is this. The bottom 20% need to be taken care of. They need to be loved. They need to be ministered to. They have some real legitimate needs. I understand that. The question is not should they be taken care of. The question is who should take care of them. That's the question. And in the church for too long, we've been on a guilt trip that we don't need to be on. For too long in the church, we think the pastor should take care of all those needs. We think that if we don't do it, somehow we're not showing compassion and we're not showing love. I'll tell you what, if you are doing it, what you're not showing is leadership. A leader can't do everything, and one of the things a leader will do will be that he or she makes sure that all those needs are being met. And if you want some good biblical understanding of that, now I don't bring in the Bible a lot because I find it messes Christians up. But if you really want to know how to do it, Acts chapter 6 will teach you. When the widows were being neglected, the pastors didn't say, well, we're going to get up an hour earlier and take care of them. They said, hold on. Whoa, wait a minute. Let's look around the church and let's find some lay people and get some qualifications of standards of behavior and a level that we want them to be on, and we'll let them take care of the widows so that we can stay in the ministry of the word and in prayer. It's a biblical principle. When Jethro came to Moses and said, let me tell you something, Mo, we got to talk. I've gone by your office for the last week, and the people are sitting in your office, and they can't, or out in the lobby, and they can't get into your office. And I've been talking to my daughter, and says you haven't been home for the last 2 weeks, and you haven't seen the kids play Little League baseball for a while. Somebody saying, now what passage of Scripture is that? Old and New Testament both are biblical precedents and foundations for what I'm sharing today. Let me say one more thing, and then I'm ready to move on. I know why we don't work with the top 20%. The top 20% intimidates us. I know. We're not sure we can bring anything to the table. We're not really sure they want to hear from us. That's the reason, let me stop here for a moment. That's the reason I do leadership training, so that you'll be qualified to work with leaders in your church, one. And number two, that's the reason we provide leadership resources, so that you'll have resources to provide for the leaders in your church that they can identify with. I want to tell you right now, all you've got to do with any leader, bank president, I care not who it is, all you got to do to get on a wavelength with a leader in your church, or a leader that is not in your church that you want to reach, is take an Enjoy Life Club tape, hand it to him, or hand it to her and say, would you do me a favor? Listen to this. I promise you within 2 days there'll be a phone call. Where did you get the tape? Who is this? Can we talk? What I try to do is 2 things. I try to raise up pastors in their leadership development from a 4 to a 7 or 8 so they can attract 7 or 8s to their church. If I came to your church on Sunday, if I came to your congregation on Sunday, I would never need to meet you. All I had to do was meet your people, and I could tell what level of leadership you're on. Like begets like. So I do 2 things. I try to raise you as a leader so that you can attract 7s and 8s, 1. Number 2 is I try to provide resources for you that you can put in your leaders' hands so that draws them to you, because I learned a long time ago, leaders go where resources are. That's my mission. That's why I do it.
We now continue with part 2 of leading from the highest level.
The 4th difference between leaders who develop leaders and leaders who develop followers is the leader's abilities. Leaders who develop followers are good leaders, and leaders who develop leaders are great leaders. And I think that's true. I think it takes a better leader to lead a leader than it does to lead a follower. And I put down here a chart that I hope I can explain. I'll give it a shot. On the left-hand side, you see the leader's ability. And if we go down to the bottom, the 1 is 2 is a poor leader, and you get up to 4 is an average leader, and 7's a good one, and get up to 8s, 9s, and 10s up to the great leader area. Now, here's what I want you to see. Your level of leadership will determine the level of people that you attract to you. So if you go down to the bottom right, the bottom side, you'll see these are the followers' abilities. These are followers, and when you get the followers that have 6, 7s, 8s, 9s, and 10s, they're not only followers, but they have potential to be leaders. Now, here's what I want you to see. If you go up and say, let's say you're a 6 as a leader. If you're a 6 as a leader, probably you will attract 6s on down. Now, you can see in this little diagram, there's a perforated line here with an arrow. Here's what I want you to see. If you're a 6 as a leader, if you'll go from that dotted line on in, if you'll just look at that, that is the size of what your organization is going to be. You've already got a picture of it. Now, you can see if you can just go up a couple notches to an 8, all of a sudden you're doubling the size of your organization, because you're doubling the size of its potential. In fact, the best way I can explain it is this. Do you notice every time you go up one more number, how that it increases major over the previous number as far as size and influence? Do you notice that? So by the time you get to 9s, I'm telling you, you're talking about major territory that you're taking. Now, leaders who develop followers are good leaders, but leaders who develop leaders are great leaders. Now, let me give you observations about that little chart that I had. Very simple. Letter A, leadership flows across and down, but seldom up. That's true. 9s don't follow 6s. Letter B, the best way to reach a higher level follower is to become a higher level leader. Letter C, to stay on the same level and not grow as a leader will limit the quantity and the quality of the people that you attract. That's a fact. And we want to increase in quantity and also in quality. The 5th difference between leaders who develop leaders and leaders who develop followers is the leader's attitude. Leaders who develop followers hold on to position and power, and leaders who develop leaders let go of position and power. They try to give it away. A question that every one of us as leaders have to ask ourselves on a continual basis is this: am I misusing my power? Bill Classen, my prayer partner, asked me that question. In his list of questions that he asked me, many times he'll say, John, are you misusing your power? Why did you preach that message? Good question. I need to be asked that. In your notes, I want to read one little section here. It says, go to the people, live among them, learn from them, love them, start with what they know, build on what they have. But of the best leaders, when their task is accomplished and their work is done, the people will remark, we have done it ourselves. By the way, remember when we were kids? Did you ever play the follow the leader game? How many of you played follow the leader? Yeah, we all did. And you know what the object is. Let me ask you a question. Why do the kids follow the leader? They follow the leader so that if they do a good job and do what the leader did, what do they get to become? The leader. That's the only reason they play the game. Think about it. They play the game, follow the leader, so they can become the leader. It's quite simple. Our problem is, many times as leaders, we make following our leadership so difficult that they think they can never become the leader. Let me explain. If we were playing follow the leader right now, let's say we're out on a basketball court, if I shot a layup, you'd feel pretty confident. You get the basketball, you shoot a layup. If I shot a foul shot, you'd feel confident, you'd shoot a foul shot. But let's say, and this could never happen in my lifetime, but let's say, all of a sudden I get that basketball, stand into that rim, do a 360-degree turn in the air, and slam dunk that ball. Pick it up. It's your turn. Now you're in trouble. You know why you're in trouble? I just violated a leadership principle. I just did something that you can't do, asked you to do it, and intimidated you. What I have done now is I no longer am developing leaders. You know what I'm now developing? Spectators. So what's happening in the church all over America? I have put a gap between you and me. I have now caused a gulf to come to where no longer will you aspire to be a leader. You now will rather sit down and tell other people what an awesome person I am. In fact, you'll sit along the side and say, oh, pastor, slam dunk that ball, do that 360-degree turn. We want to see that one more time. And you'll say, man, look at that. Isn't he something? Oh, yes. Oh, man, he's good. Did you hear him preach? Wow. Nobody like him. Nobody like him. Go ahead, preacher. Do it again. Go ahead. We're with you. We're behind you. Go ahead. And we got spectators. We got spectators because we don't understand the follow the leader game. The hope of a person following is that someday they can do well enough that they get the ball. And whenever we outperform them to the place that we intimidate them, they no longer will be leaders. They'll just sit in the pew and admire what we've done. Number 6, the leader's time. Leaders who develop followers spend time with people. Leaders who develop leaders invest time with people. Followers are not as time conscious as leaders, and followers are not as bottom line as leaders. That's just a fact. Not right or wrong, it's just a fact. I would encourage you to not only see who you're spending your time with, but I would encourage you to look at your calendar and see how you're spending your time. In fact, I would ask you to do 4 things. Make an assessment. Log your time for the last month and assess where you're spending your time. After you do that, letter B, make an agenda. Now, don't look at your calendar and see where you spent your time. Look at your agenda of where you should spend your time. And then thirdly, call for action. Off of your agenda as you prioritize, then lay out your action, and then letter D, evaluate your accomplishment when you're done. The question with the calendar is an absolutely essential question. The question is not, Will I spend time with people? The question is, who will I spend my time with? The question is not, am I going to help people? The question is, who am I going to help? The question is not, will my calendar be full? But the question is, who will fill my calendar? If the leader fills the calendar by priorities, that leader will use his or her time effectively. If the leader lets the people fill it, I promise you, you'll be on their agenda, not your agenda. What general of an army would every day go out to the privates and say, got any ideas? Need to talk to me? Leaders lead, not react. A long time ago, I learned to fill my calendar. Long time ago, I learned to prioritize. If you would go to my office desk in San Diego, my home office, and you'd walk in and sit there in my chair over on the right-hand side, you would see my next month prioritized day by day, every hour. I learned a long time ago. Either I put my priorities in the calendar and get things done, or I leave that calendar open and allow people to come in, and now I'm on their priorities. And that priority, by the way, that priority, what you put on your calendar may be family time. You know what? You may have right on there, I'm going to my kids' Little League game at 4 o'clock on Tuesday. And Sister Smith calls you and wants you to come and anoint her toe at 4 o'clock on Tuesday. And you say, Sister Smith, I'm so sorry. Or we have an appointment. What would it profit any of us to build a big church and lose our family? Come on now. Yeah. It's not worth it. And I want to tell you something. I'm not running across town to take care of your kids if my kids have a need. I'm not going to let my kids. I'm a PK. I can speak to this. Thank you very much. I'm not about to take care of your kids and have my kids grow up saying, boy, Dad took care of everybody else except me. I have no scars about being a PK, but I'll tell you what, I went to camps with other preachers' kids, and I'd listen to them talk, and they'd talk about how they hated their parents. And I kept saying, what's wrong with these people? I love having my dad in the ministry. Man, this is wonderful. I kept thinking, why are they like this? Well, I know why they're like that, because all their life they heard that they were a preacher's kid, and they had to act a certain way. They had to do this, and they had pressures. Cut that stuff out. Don't put that kind of pressure on your family. Your wife doesn't have to play the piano. All of the unnecessary hoops in life we jump through because some insecure person wants to put those pressures on us. I remember I grew up, I played basketball. And when I grew up, we had basketball practice every night during the week, which meant as a kid, I never went to Wednesday night service because I always went to basketball practice. And back then, Wednesday night's no big deal now, but back then, Wednesday night was a big deal. I mean, it used to be, if you want to see how popular the pastor is, come on Sunday morning, how popular the church is, come on Sunday night, and how popular God is on Wednesday. And I remember Laban coming to my dad one time and saying, you know, Pastor, your son doesn't come to the Wednesday night services. No, he says he's at basketball practice. They said, well, don't you think your son ought to be modeling for all of our kids here in the church? What? He said he'll model basketball if they want to play ball. I mean, I loved it. My dad looked at them, did not take that wimpy stuff from that person. I just wanted to look at him and say, just smack him right across the head, Dad. Then pray for him in the name of Jesus, of course. The leader's growth philosophy is different. Leaders who develop followers grow their organization by attracting more followers. Leaders who develop leaders grow their organization by training more leaders. A lot of difference. Not right or wrong, just a lot of difference. Leaders who develop followers grow through events. Leaders who develop leaders grow through equipping. Leaders who develop followers grow outside in. Leaders who develop leaders grow inside out. Outside in growth feeds off of charisma. Inside out growth feeds off of commitment. If you develop a follower, you add, but if you develop a leader, you multiply. Very simple. By the way, how do you develop another small group in your church? Very simple. Raise up another leader. Your small groups will stop growing when you stop raising up leaders. Every time you get a new leader, you get another small group. Every time you lack a leader, you don't get another group. Grow from the inside out. Basically what I'm saying is this. You can either raise leaders and develop a strong core and then explode in your growth outward, or if you want to, you can go out and attract all kind of followers and bring them in and try to develop leaders. I want to say this. I don't think either one is right or wrong. I just think that there are two approaches to it. Number 8, the leader's expectation. Leaders who develop followers ask for little commitment, and leaders who develop leaders ask for much commitment. Now, when you ask for commitment, you keep winners and you lose whiners. Now, let me make sure we understand this. Very simple. Because this is a hard thing for many leaders to do. They come to me and say, now, you mean you really ask for a lot of commitment? Yeah, I really do. Mm-hmm. You guessed her, Chester. You say, well, now let me ask you another question. And since we're on this commitment thing, if you ask for high commitment, aren't there people that will leave the church? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are. See, one of the things that always amuses me, it used to amaze me, now it just amuses me. One of the things that really amuses me about pastors is that when they ask for commitment and people leave the church, they'll say, boy, I lost something. Boy, we lost some people. Can I tell you something? If they didn't give you any commitment, you didn't lose anything. Can I ask a question? What did you lose? If they're giving no money into the church and you preach on tithing, they get mad and leave. Let me think, because I'm not real good at math. Let me see here. 0 minus 0. I believe that's 0. And you guys go chasing after him. You ought to be turning cartwheels, thanking Jesus. Get rid of that dead wood, that dross. Just a thought. You're right, Bill. You choose who you lose. Here's one of the great things about being a leader is you get to choose who you lose. Now, that's wonderful. Because you ask for commitment, you lose all the uncommitted people. If you don't ask for commitment, guess who you lose? All the committed people. Because they're going to sit in your pew for about 3 years. They're going to get tired of your wimpiness. And they're going to say, I think I'm going to go across town. I'm going to find a real man's church. You say, oh, but I'm telling you, ask for commitment. You're going to drive people away. No, can I tell you something? Committed people don't get driven away when you ask for commitment. The reason they got successful in life is because they've been committed all their life. That's how they kept their marriage. That's how they built their business. That's how they're going to raise their family. Don't worry about commitment scaring committed people. The only people it scares are people that have never made a commitment in their life. And that's okay, scare them. Now let me give you a couple thoughts, and let me just come back and do just a little bit on this. Leaders who develop followers have high expectations of themselves and low expectations of others. Wow. You see, if you have low expectations of people, you'll ask for a low commitment from people. In fact, here's the way I've watched it. Leaders who develop followers expect them to show up. How many times you hear a pastor, oh, God, help them to come today. Oh, God, we want a crowd. Help a crowd to be here. See, leaders who develop followers, they expect them to show up. Leaders who develop leaders, they expect them to grow up. There's a world of difference between those two. You see, leaders who develop leaders have high expectations of themselves, and they have high expectations of others. Absolutely. A prime example of that, is Jesus and his ministry. You know the story as well as I do. Remember in the feeding of the 5,000? Fish and chips day? You remember the story? Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, Jesus taught, and man, I'm telling you, they fish and chips, and man, when they went home that day, they said, we heard this incredible teacher, and all that, we had the best fish and chips I have ever had. And people said, where's he going to be tomorrow? Well, he's going to be over here. And the next day, the Bible says, a larger crowd came. Wouldn't you go? It's fish and chips day. Now, I'm going to tell you something about people. Let me tell you something about a crowd. You can never satisfy them. I'll guarantee you, as they're going back over there to hear Jesus the next day, some are saying, you know, I wonder if we'll get a little tartar sauce on the fish today. I miss salt. Did you miss salt on the fish yesterday? We'd have had a little salt. You can't satisfy a crowd. It's not your goal. You know what Jesus did, don't you? He saw all these people coming. He got panicked. He said, oh, my goodness sakes, they're after fish and chips. And he changed his sermon that day. He said, I'm going to speak on discipleship. Let me tell you, if you're going to follow me, you're going to have to leave your family, your father, your mom. You're going to have to take up a cross. And by the time the Lord finished this message, they all left, remember? In fact, they're out of the balcony so fast. In fact, it got so bad. You remember? Did you read the Bible? Do you remember? He turned around to his own church board, his disciples. Remember? He said, are you guys going to go too? That's how bad it got. You see, Jesus understood something. He understood something about leadership, and that is, put the commitment high. Put it high. You don't know what you have in your church until you ask for commitment. You're just in la-la land until you ask for commitment. You got to find out where they are. Draw a line and find out. I'd rather have 100 committed people in my church than 1,000 uncommitted. Okay, number 9. The leader's style is different. Leaders who develop followers lead people the same, and leaders who develop leaders lead people differently. Oh, this is a tremendous principle. Tremendous principle. What I have noticed is that leaders who develop followers, one of their big concerns is that they want to make sure that everybody is treated fairly, and they want to make sure everybody gets an equal amount of time, and they want to make sure that everybody has an equal say. Mm-hmm. Leaders who develop leaders, they're not into that at all. They understand that it ain't even supposed to be equal. I love basketball, and Chicago Bulls won recently, NBA championship. Phil Jackson's a very, very good coach. You have to be a very, very, very good coach to have the personalities he has on that team. He's a classic. In fact, later on today in another lecture, when I talk about different leadership styles, he is the classic bridge builder leader. Classic. Okay, let's do a scenario. NBA Finals, let's say Seattle won the 6th game. Let's say it was the 7th game. Let's say it's only the 7th game, but there are only 5 seconds left. Seattle is ahead by 1 point, but the good news is the Bulls have the ball out at half court. Phil Jackson calls timeout. The Chicago Bulls gather around him, and he gets out the chart, and there's only 5 seconds left, and this next shot's going to determine who the world champion is of the NBA, and he's got his chart out, and he's got his pin out, and he's got his players around there, and he is diagramming the last play of the game, the one that is going to determine the world championship. And as he is diagramming it, 20,000 fans in the United Center are on their feet, and they are absolutely thrilled knowing that the championship is going to be decided on the next shot. And as Phil Jackson's down there diagramming that play, 20,000 people in the stands know what he's saying. This is an IQ test. When he gets done diagramming the play, Michael Jordan, the finest player to ever play basketball, ever, will shoot the deciding shot. It's an IQ test. Let's say he finishes diagramming the play. The timeout is about to be over. They're ready to put the players out on the court. And right before they're ready to put the players out on the court, one of the guards raises his hand. Excuse me, Coach. Coach Jackson, can I say something? Yeah. What do you want? What do you want? Well, I don't know how to say this. There's something troubling my spirit. I can't find peace. What's your problem? Well, Coach, it's my turn to shoot the ball. What? It's my turn to shoot the ball. What do you mean? Well, Michael has shot it 17 times this game. And I've only shot it 4. And my feelings are hurt. It's my turn to shoot the ball. Now, can you see Phil Jackson? You can see him. Huh? I mean, can't you see Phil Jackson? I mean, can't you see Phil Jackson looking at this wimpy guy and saying, I'm so sorry. How could I ever be so insensitive to your needs? Let's go to therapy together. Phil Jackson's going to say, shut up! Sit down! Go to the shower! You're fired! You know why? Because Phil Jackson is paid to bring the Chicago Bulls a championship. His goal isn't to make everybody happy on the team. Can't you see Phil say, well, you know what, can I have another timeout? We got one of our players whose spirit's bothering him a little. We just need another timeout to sing Kumbaya. What would happen to Phil Jackson? Can't you see Phil Jackson say, oh, you're right, it is your turn. Oh, I'm so sorry. Come on, statistician, let me know whose turn it is next time to shoot this ball. Michael, you take the ball out. Can't you see them letting this guard shoot the ball? He misses the ball. Or misses the ball. He misses the shot. Probably misses the ball, too. He misses the shot. The next day of the Chicago Tribune, the headline says, Phil Jackson is a stupid coach. Of course he's a stupid coach. He had the best player on the team, and he let the best player throw it to the worst player on the team to make the shot. He is a stupid coach. Can I ask you a question? Why is it the world can recognize a stupid coach and the church cannot recognize a stupid leader? Just a thought. Come on now. By the way, if Phil Jackson would let this wimpy guy have his way, can I tell you something? When anybody in the church puts their needs above the needs of the church and the mission and the vision of the church, they're out of place. It's major selfishness when I want to shoot the ball when there's somebody else on the team that can shoot the ball better. That's why we have the different gifts in the body of Christ, so the different gifts can complement one another. And those who have leadership gifts should be leading, and those who don't have leadership gifts shouldn't be leading. Now, I know you're saying, well, that was a worldly example. Let's talk about Jesus. Not long, he'll mess you up. I understand that. Let me ask you a question on spending time with people. We've talked about the top 20%, the bottom 20%. Some of you are sitting there and your little ministry heart is about to have an attack. Let me ask you a question. Let's talk about Jesus for a moment. Forget Phil Jackson, Chicago Bulls. Let's talk about Jesus. Let me ask you a question. I think you know the Bible. A yes or no will be sufficient. Let me ask you a question. Did Jesus spend an equal amount of time with everyone, yes or no? Of course he didn't. I mean, he's got the crowds. Did Jesus spend as much time with the crowds as he did his disciples? Of course he did. You know what he was doing. In fact, read the Gospels. I mean, Jesus is teaching. The crowd's all around him. He's backing up toward the lake. Pete, get the boat, get the boat, get the boat. Off they go. Let me ask you another question. Yes or no, we'll do this. Did Jesus spend an equal amount of time with his 12 disciples, yes or no? No, he didn't. Of the 12, he had 3 that were the teacher's pets. Pete, Jim, and John. Do you read the Bible? I can tell you do. Now, Pete, Jim, and John, absolutely. Jesus walking with the disciples, and about midday, he says, guys, stop here for a moment. Hey, Pete, Jim, and John, I want to take you for a couple days with me. You come on. You other disciples? Whatever. You stay. We'll be back. Couple days, we'll be back. Now, don't get any trouble. Just hang around here. We'll see you later. Come on, Pete, Jim, and John. Let's go, boys. Off they go. Now, can't you see the guys who are left behind? Can't you see Andy looking at Phil and saying, that ticks me off? There they go. There they go again. There they go again. It's always Pete, Jim, and John. Pete, Jim, and John. Pete, Jim, and John. Jesus, Pete, Jim, and John. Pete, Jim, and John. There they go again. Remember the last time they went? Bart, you remember the last time they went? Ah, they went up on that mountain and had that vision. We could not shut Peter up. He talked about building 3 tabernacles and God and all this stuff. Remember, we had to sit there and listen to him. There they go again. Pete, Jim, and John. Pete, Jim, and John. Hey, Tom. Jesus ever asked you to go with him like on a trip like that? No, he hasn't, and I doubt if he ever will. How are we doing? By the way, of the 3 disciples, there was 1. I don't know where we ever got this idea in the church that the pastor was to make everybody happy and the pastor was supposed to spend an equal amount of time. And what I love is these people, when you don't, they put you on a guilt trip. Cut that stuff out. And they say, well, Pastor, you haven't seen me in a year. You say, well, I haven't even missed you. You've thought it. It's great therapy just to say it. Now, folks, listen. Love them? Absolutely. Walk slowly through the crowd? Absolutely. In fact, on Sundays, one of my rules was I don't want to see my leaders on Sunday. I want to minister to the people, walk through the crowd, kiss the people, hug the people, pray with the people, take time, walk. I mean, that was always on Sunday. But on Monday through Saturday, spend time with your leaders, developing, growing, recruiting, raising them up. There's one more difference between leaders who develop leaders and leaders who develop followers. And that difference, number 10, is in the area of impact. Leaders who develop followers impact only the people that they can touch. And leaders who develop leaders impact people beyond themselves and their time. I believe that. And I think that's where I have my passion. I have a passion to make an impact. I have a passion to make a difference. And I believe you have that same passion, and the way that you do it is by bringing people around you, leaders around you, raising them up and pouring yourself into their life. And the moment that you pour yourself into them, the moment you pour yourself into them, then all of a sudden they come back and bless you absolutely incredible.